mind a photo album where I have deliberately gathered some scenes from my life that have spoken powerfully to me. I've just said, I've got to remember this scene because, well, this photo album is entitled The Church or Christians. And I say, I've got to remember this scene because this has the essence of what it means to be the church, what it means to be a Christian. It just embodies it, it captures it, it communicates it. And so I freeze it and I put it away. And I draw it out every now and then and just savor that picture. And it nourishes me and guides me. And I want to share one of those pictures with you today. It takes place in San Antonio, where I lived for 13 years. Doris was just in San Antonio. I've chided her at least 2 times already for not eating breakfast tacos while she was there. She blames it on her sisters. They wouldn't let her eat a breakfast taco. No. I was at the First Presbyterian Church, and this is a large church. It's a regional church, a citywide church, 3,000 members. There were usually 4, 5, or 6 pastors on the staff. And we come to officers' night. And it's what's called a bicameral system. That is, there are deacons and there are elders. And being such a sizable church, there are about 45 in each group. In total, about 90. And on officers' night, we would gather together to eat. There was somebody who would cook, and we'd go through the line, and we'd visit. And deacons would tell elders what they were doing, and elders would tell deacons what they were doing. And it was fun. On this particular night, I come in late. Typically, I had a committee meeting beforehand, and not all of them were elders or deacons. And so I'd be putting stuff away and saying goodbye. And I got in there late this night. And after I got my food, looked around, there were only 2 seats way over by the water and beverage station. And there was just 1 seat over there, and I went down and sat there. And to my left was Will Morris and Marion McCurdy. Now, I got to tell you about them because the snapshot involves them. Both were 85, 86, 87, something like that at the time. And Will was a lawyer in San Antonio. He was married to Rachel. They told about him as a young man when San Antonio was a small town and no air conditioning, how he would walk from the boarding house at 5th Avenue all the way down past the Alamo, and he would be carrying his lunch pail. He and Rachel had 3 children. 2 sons died in the war, and 1 died in an accident. But by God's grace, there wasn't any kind of heaviness to them. They continued to be bright lights of care and love. Now, Marion was an ear, nose, and throat doctor. He, in fact, was the oldest person I've ever taken on a mission trip. He was with me on a mission trip at age 81. And we were in the Yucatan doing a medical team, and it was really cute because we had with us also Carrie Stratton, who turned 40 on the trip and was a premier ear, nose, and throat surgeon in San Antonio. And as the Indians would come to the hut where the 2 ENTs were, they would not go to Carrie Stratton, the young premier ENT doctor. They asked to go to the real doctor, Dr. McCurdy, the one with the white hair. And these were special guys. In fact, I would say they were 2 of the finest men I've ever met. They've both gone on to glory. And their fineness really had to do with their dedication to God and to their families and to First Presbyterian Church over decades and decades. had to do with their constancy. That's what dedication is over time. It had to do with integrity. You just had no sense of any gamesmanship in them. They just did not have any guile at all. I wonder who you have in your past that might be somebody like a Will or a Marion. Do you have a Sunday school teacher, a pastor in a former church, a grandfather, a father, somebody who has that kind of character, power that you're thankful for? Well, I've got to tell you, because it's part of the story, that by this age, Will had developed quite a tremor. Just his hand, his arms. And Marion couldn't see very well. He could see some, but he couldn't see very well. In this room of 90 to 100 people, the moderators of the elder and then of the deacon groups would get up towards the end as the meal was settling down and before we were to break for our separate meetings. And they would convey a little bit about, this is what the deacons have been doing, this is what the elders have been doing, this is what we're going to do in our meeting, this is what we're going to do in our meeting. So there was communication. And that time started. The moderators were getting up, and so everyone's attention, so Will and Marion are on my left, the moderator is over there, we're all around the room, and we're all looking that way. And here's the snapshot. For some reason, I just do a little glance, and there, without fanfare, and on the sideline, Marion was lifting a spoon of food to Will's lips. Just naturally, with full dignity, one helping and the other being helped. Nothing embarrassing, nothing out of the ordinary. It's just what you do. You help and you let yourself be helped without any shame, without any gloat. It's just what you do. And that moment is freeze-framed in my mind and heart as that's what it means to be a Christian. We talked last week about leadership season and that we all have an influence. That's what it means to have influence, to just simply help and to be helped. Both. Not one or the other, but both and. And I don't know if I can draw all of this together in a more simple or powerful or conclusive way than to simply say, hey, let's be like Will. Hey, let's be like Marion. Hey, let's be like the person I asked you to think about just a minute ago. I think that's what it all comes down to. I think that's what Jesus said. Well, I think that's it. I think that's the sermon. Be like Will, be like Marion, be like the person you thought. And I don't think I can say it any better than that. But since we have a few minutes, I'm going to try anyway. So, So here are three things to note. One is to be connected relationally with others. They're a group of 12 disciples. They're eating together. They're talking together. And from the beginning, God said to Adam, it's not good for you to be alone. Last week we saw Moses. He had Aaron and Miriam. He had Jethro, a father-in-law. He ended up with those who helped him with the thousands and all the way down to the tens. So be connected relationally with others. This isn't a Lone Ranger kind of thing. This isn't isolation. This isn't hermit. To be a Christian and to have influence, to be a part of the church, is to be connected relationally with others. There's a terrific book called Leadership in the 21st Century, and it's by Henry Nouwen. And Henry was a Dutch priest, and he had a ministry in academia at Harvard and Yale, and then he left that to go to L'Arche, community with the mentally challenged, and he gave his life to caring for those. And the opening page of his book is cute and serious at the same time, and I think you'll see how it relates to connecting relationally. He says, "The first thing that struck me when I came to live in a house with mentally handicapped people was that their liking or disliking me had absolutely nothing to do with any of the many useful things I had done until then. Since nobody could read my books, they could not impress anyone there, and since most of them never went to school, my 20 years at Notre Dame, Yale, and Harvard did not provide a significant introduction. My considerable ecumenical experience proved even less valuable, and when I offered some meat to one of the assistants during dinner, one of the handicapped men said to me, 'Don't give him meat. He doesn't eat meat. He's a Presbyterian.'" And in this book, Nouwen makes us aware that when he would travel to do speaking and retreats, that he would always take with him a member of the community. And that member of the community would stand with him before a hotel banquet hall filled with 1,000 people, and right there in the lectern would help turn the pages of his notes and interject comments into the microphone, whether Henry was ready for them or not, ad lib. But his reflection backwards over his whole life was that there was more fruitfulness when he was with somebody from the L'Arche community. All that prowess of academia, all his priesthood stuff, it just wasn't as fruitful as when he was connected relationally to another and influenced with that other. Now think about this. You know, Will Morris was Will Morris all by himself, day in and day out. And Marion McCurdy was Marion McCurdy all by himself, day in and day out. But there was a Will to Marion, and there was a Marion to Will. The one evoked from the other something that nobody else could evoke. When Will was in relationship to me, that was special, but I could not evoke from Will what Marion could evoke from Will. And the same thing is true with Marion. So there is something surprising and beautiful and sparkling and fireworks like when we are connected relationally. Something is drawn out of us as I relate to you, and a little something different as I relate to you, and something as I relate to you. There's something beautiful, and our influence happens as we are connected relationally to others. Now, the second thing is that we want to be connected relationally to God. You know, Jesus, though he was God, still we see him going out to pray. He wasn't just praying to himself, he was connected to God. And he had told them about God. He told them that he wanted God to take care of the disciples as he went away. You know, when you think about this, what is the world hungry for? You never hear, you don't see in the interviews at baseball games when they go into the stands or talk to the players warming up. You never hear when you go to the PTA meetings. You never hear from the people who show up on CNN as consultants. What you never hear is, you know what the world needs? A lot more people in committees. You know, you never hear that. What the world needs is people who are like Mother Teresa. They need people like Billy Graham. They need people who are grounded and rooted into God, and it comes out of their being. It was once said that an American Indian chief went to a Christian worship service and came out and said, "Lot of wind, lot of noise, no rain." What he's saying is what we're all sensing is that we need the rain of God. We need to be rooted into God. And so if we're going to have an influence, just working, being operative out of our own resources is not good enough. The world, you need, I need, we need from each other a connection relationally to God. And then the third thing that we should be aware of is that we need to be connected relationally to others and God as servants. That's what Jesus said, as servants. You know, being a servant means not so much being a power over, does it, as being a power under. It means that we stop trying to be so interesting and start trying to be interested. You know, it means that we give up trying to be someone and we start doing something. That we release trying to prove ourselves to others, which is just a way of serving ourselves. We release all of that to do something for others. Now here's a really interesting phenomenon. That when we are truly servants, not just posing as servants, but when God comes in and we ask Him to remake our DNA so that we have a basic servant structure, it says in Philippians that God humbled Himself and became flesh, taking the form of a servant. And He took the form of a servant because that's who God in His nature, in His DNA is. So when we have that remade and we're acting like servants, and you see it here and again, people respond. They go, "Thank you for meeting our needs. Thank you for being so delicate with us, being so helpful with us." And with that, there's a return of that person to you, and there's an esteeming of that person to you, and there's an elevating of that person to you. And so you get esteemed and you get elevated. Yeah, you see this, for example. Let's say our alderman has really done a good job serving us. And so we go back to him with another problem, and he serves us. And pretty soon we're at the rally that alderman becomes mayor. See, that's the elevation process. Or in terms of businesses, if they meet our needs well, it's economical, it's of value, then we go back to them, we tell others, and they get a lead in market share. So great service, good service, true service ends up bringing power. It empowers. But we know, don't we, that power corrupts. So what are we going to do? If we serve well, there's going to be power. And what Jesus told us, and He told us this in the parable of the talents, for example, is that as true servants, we always take the power that comes from our service and we reinvest it in service. That's what the Christian life is. Serving and taking the power that comes from serving and reinvesting it in service. In a sideline, unflappable, dignified, and simple way. Hermann Hesse has a novel entitled Journey to the East. It's a band of people. They're traveling. It's a pilgrimage. There's one in the group. His name is Leo. And he seems to be a servant to the group. Does all sorts of these menial things, but he's also more. He has a way that by his song, he keeps them in heart. But one day, Leo disappears. And the band falls into disarray. And they're a motley crew, and eventually they make it and find shelter in a monastery. And as they come into the monastery, they find that the titular head of that monastery, and indeed of the whole order that would be over all the monasteries, was Leo. Was Leo. And so this passage, this sermon is you, brother and sister, Christian, man or woman. You have influence. And that influence is something that, well, it's just different. It's right. If you'll think, I'm going to be like Will. I'm going to be like Marion. I'm going to be like the person I asked you to think of. You're going to be like Leo. You'll be like Jesus. And you'll be like yourself with Jesus helping you. And you'll know the wonderful life of serving and having character and making the world a great and beautiful place. Amen? Amen. Amen.